think we're ready to go. Let her rip.
All right, well, welcome everybody. And so today we're just going to go over, fitting and cutting a bridge. Now, of course, I'll be using a violin blank to start, and this is your most common way you're going to find a violin bridge. Now, there are a lot of different qualities of violin bridges. This is just a student one, no stamping, no manufacturer mark on there. You will find once you get into them, like this is a fancier version if you have someone that wants to go fancy. This is from a company called DH, and they laser cut these out. Of course, you see most of these are CNC nowadays, but you can get into fancies. Um, Also, once you get into nicer bridges, like I personally like the Albert Mirror Course quite a bit. Now, this one is a Lux, so you'll find these in different brands will still have different qualities. So from the Albert Miracore, you'll have just the standard one. You'll have a Lux, which is like this. You'll have a Super Lux and a Deluxe, and all of which get into higher grading, maple. Most of that is how long it's been aged, honestly. So it's one of those where you're really paying for the amount of time they let this cure. These do get more expensive as you get into the Luxes and Deluxes. These bridge blanks, like if you get this Lux here, I think is about 25, $30 for the blank. You get into like the Deluxes, they're now 75 to $80 just for the blank, and then you're doing your labor on top of that. So they can get expensive. So this one here's a deluxe viola bridge. This is actually one I cut for a viola I made, and then for some reason it was too short. Either violin or viola moved enough or changed shape enough that I had to cut a new bridge that was taller. So this is one that I cut a while ago, trying to see if we can get a better. So you can see I cut the heart a little different than, I actually made the center part a heart. Now the actual shape of this, there is a reason for having they call these the kidneys and this the heart. There is a reason for that. They do those so there is no direct link to the top from the string, so that it evens out the tone. And that's what all the violins, cellos, basses, they all have that same pattern for that reason. Let me grab a cello bridge real quick. So this is a fractional style cello bridge. This is, I think, is a 3/4 bridge, and you can see it's got the same thing. You have the two kidneys and the heart, all of which there will be a string above it, so that breaks up that you don't have a direct line from string to top in any given location. So that is the reason why they have those in it. Now, as far as tooling goes for this, mostly you'll just want. Let's see. I'll start using this other violin camera. You're mostly going to want a knife or two. Let me see. Let me switch my view so I can see better. So you have some sort of a knife, a violin making knife. You can use a single bevel or double bevel. I just use the double bevel. That's just what I'm used to using. I have it in several different sizes for doing different tasks of cutting on the bridge. You'll need a ruler. This is just a 6-inch rule in metric, so 150 millimeters. This is backwards today, so I'm having a hard time. And then I also use a little metal scraper of some flavor. You don't have to use this. I'll show you, it makes fitting a little bit faster. And then a little strip of sandpaper. This is 220. You can you can do anything from like 180 to like 400. Obviously, your more aggressive is going to go faster, but your finer ones have a smoother feel. I like the 220 to 320. This is kind of my favorite spot for that. And then I have a whole array of templates. We were just showing these. So this is a violin 4/4 template. They also have, this is the viola, and they go cello. There's a cello size. Sorry, I'll get that. And goes clear up to a bass size. And all of these have a lot of different information on them. Basically, this gives you the Here we go. This gives you the curvature of the top of the bridge, which is, I don't fluctuate from this curve very much, even if the board is a slightly different curve because of playability reasons. If you're taking a bow across this, you got to have enough curve so that you can just play one string at a time. And now this one does have the hair gauge on it, which I know Grace just showed hers does not. But then these little tabs here are for doing your height when you're cutting your bridge. So you have the side for the G and side for this is a bass for the low E, and it gives you some given heights to work with. And so I will usually, and these go all the way down to, like, I have here is the little 1/16 violin bridge template. So they go down into little tiny ones. And I have down to an 8th size cello, which looks more, whoops, gets the right angle. This looks more like a violin template. And they're not, you can see they're not much different as far as that goes. But they are slightly, curvatures are slightly different as you get into cellos and violins and stuff. So that's why there are different ones. And for the viola, they do make smaller size viola, but they actually, after this one, you just start using the violin bridges for like 14-inch violas and 13-inch violas. And viola is the oddball. They don't run in fractionals like the rest of them. They run in inch by the body length, which I think is funny because the rest of the measurements are in metric, but for some reason the body length is in standard. And then if you do have questions, please ask and I'll clarify. All right. So this is a this is actually a 3/4 violin. I'm gonna fit a full size on it just for the fact that it exaggerates the offset on the feet. A lot of the violins I have in here right now, the bridge feet are so close that you're not going to see much fitting. You do find different curvatures of the top. So if I move this, you'll see that top has a nice curve to it. It's a much tighter curve right here at the F holes than it is up here at like the upper or the lower bout. Now, as far as placement goes, let's see if I can get, there we go. So if you look at the violin and at the F holes, you'll see right here they have these notches. Now the notches, this one is decorative. This one actually, sorry, this one here actually is to give you bridge placement. So this is your mincer, or the spot where the bridge goes. And so when they cut these notches, they are supposed to be placed for bridge placement. So when you fit this bridge, the bridge is going to go right in the middle of those notches. If you draw an imaginary line across those notches, you're going to, well, and actually, let's just do it real quick. It'll show it off a little easier. See if I can find my white. There's the black. So I'm actually just going to take and draw a line so we can see it. All right. So there is the line on the violin top between those two notches. And so that means you're going to take this bridge and you're going to split it in half with that line. See if I can get that to kind of show up. Anyway, but that's how you know your placement up and down. And then normally you're just going to be centering it in the F holes for placement, but not always, because sometimes the angle of the neck will come into effect. If the neck has been set on an angle, sometimes you'll have to take that bridge and fudge it to one side or the other to help the strings line up better in the board. It's not the best option, but in more student instruments, you're going to have to kind of pick a poison and kind of split the difference. Now, that means, go ahead.
Are those notches on the F holes always accurate?
They should be. I'm not going to say they always are,
but they mostly are.
They usually are. Now, you got to remember, in a violin, we're not using frets. So intonation is more on the player's part, not on the maker's part. So basically, what having a standard string length in a violin, because of muscle memory, is still going to put it in like an appropriate place, but they're all just a little bit different for the most part, fractionally. And not enough that, I mean, most violin players can kind of fudge the difference if they're starting to play and notice that they're always playing a little flat. They'll just kind of shift their hand down a little bit, and now they'll be in tune. So yeah, it's not the bridge placement isn't quite as critical as putting saddle on a guitar, because there's no frets that we have to deal with. Now that being said, lots of times you'll see bridges wander over time. So I'll show you on this old one. You'll see, whoops, shift this a little bit. So you'll see right here where this is where the bridge is supposed to go, and over time they wandered forward, which is really common as as you tune the violins and the strings stretch and you keep tuning, it just drags the bridge across the front plate. And most players don't notice because they're getting used to the new intonation as they play, because it's just moving so slowly. But yeah, so that is a very common problem right there. That you'll see bridges in total wrong places, because these are just there by tension. There's no glue holding them down.
So those notches were angled. The interior notch as the line.
Sorry, what was that? You were kind of breaking up.
Those notches were angled on that older violin. If they're angled, the interior notches for the line.
Michael, your microphone is super duper hot.
Okay, is this better?
Do you know how to change the microphone settings?
Yeah, but let me just back away while I ask this question. If the notches are angled, do you use the interior notches?
You always use the interior notches.
Okay.
Yeah, the external ones, they just put there for looks, to be honest. Like they're you don't have to have them. They just do it to balance out the look of the F-hole. And I mean, historically, if you go into instruments before the violin, they never used any kind of notch or any kind of marker for bridge placement. That was when they came up, when Gasparo da Salo invented the violin. That was really kind of one of he started doing things that were to make these things where you knew where the bridge went, and that type of stuff. He kind of started making these more modular, if you will, a little bit. But even then, I mean, string lengths and stuff fluctuated greatly. Body sizes fluctuated a lot. It took another 100 years before the violin kind of came to some sort of like a standard body size. And even then, from maker to maker, you would see 10 millimeter to 20 millimeter difference in length and width and depth. Like they fluctuated quite a bit. But they did start getting more of a standard size. Now, those were still, even the string length was shorter than it is now. But it was, at least the bodies, they were getting into some kind of a usual shape. And it kind of came about to where if you're going to play this thing up on your shoulder, most people only have X amount of room, and you can't make these things, too big. Okay. So then, I guess let's start with, so you can see when I place this bridge right here, and like I said, this bridge is too big for this violin. Normally, when you pick a bridge out, you want the bridge feet to be the same distance of the space of the upper two lobes of the F hole. And on this one, let me scoot this forward so you can see this. You'll see it's too wide. But I'm just doing this to exaggerate the arch difference so we can actually see fitting the feet. So the bridge should be smaller. It should be a 3/4 size. And one thing, before I forget, I was going to show you, they do make these kind of bridges. Now, these bridges were designed by Albert Mirecourt at first. Now, a lot of companies have done them. They actually have a pivoting, this one's really stiff, but they actually have a pivoting foot. So they put a kind of standard curve on this, then you set it down, and just with pressure, those feet will fit. And so that's what these bridges do exist, just kind of a self-fitting foot for a violin, and you definitely can use them. The only problem I've ever really seen with these is the way they cut those bridge feet. They are really thin right here. Occasionally we'll see them snap, or as time goes on, these feet will actually slide out and pop loose. And so then you are, I've actually seen these where both feet are gone. This part of the viol of the bridge here is slammed down on the top, and that's how the way that people have had them playing for years. But those do exist. So if it's something that you're just going to do a couple of, you want something really fast. These are a little more expensive with the movable feet, but they are out there. Now, tonally, I don't like. I've never taken and done like a side by side, purely cut foot like this and the movable foot, and seeing if there was like a dramatic tonal difference. I imagine there might be a little bit, but it's going to be negligible at most. These just cost more, so that's what. And it's once you get down to fitting the feet, it's not that difficult to do that. All right. So when you set this here, you'll see that we've got a gap on on the outside edges of the feet. Now, normally for me, I'm just going to take a knife and just start shaving down the bottom of these feet just to get it close. And then I'll use the sandpaper and a scraper to fine tune it down in. And most of this nowadays, I just do by eye. If you wanted, you could do something like a planed pencil and scribe that line across the foot so you have a guideline. I've done it when I first started. That's how I did it. So I just took a pencil like this, shave off one side, and then you can, just like fitting like a mandolin bridge or anything like that, you can come across here, scribe you a line across, and then you can see physically, how much you're going to take off that foot. And that's a really good way to go about it at first to kind of get a good feel for it. Like I said, nowadays I tend not to, just because I've done this enough. I can just kind of see it, and I will take a knife and trim these down, which we'll do right now. Now, one thing you can do, you can get these damp. So the way I learned it at school, you stick it on your tongue and you just get these just a little bit damp. You don't want to get them soaking wet, but if you have like a damp sponge or something like that, you tap the feet in it, just enough to kind of soften this maple a little bit. And I'll just take my knife, go across. You can see once it's, see if I get this in the right position, you can see it. I will just shave off a little bit, trying to get to that curve. Trying to hold my knife square to the bridge blank, because obviously if you're using a knife, if you tilt like this, now your bridge is going to be fit funky. You can correct a little bit of that as you go with the sandpaper, but I usually just like to look at it, try to keep as square as you can on there. Trim one side, trim the next. And you can take your time. You can do a lot of the fitting with the knife. So there you can see, like, we're close. We're in the neighborhood. Now, one side has a slight gap because I have the feet. So right now the feet are just, one foot is slightly tilted compared to the other. And so I'm getting a gap on the front on this side, a gap on the back on this side. And that is just because I didn't hold it perfectly square, but that's okay. We're going to use the sandpaper here in a second to fine tune that up. Now, one thing that I do with the scraper, and you don't have to do this, it just makes it makes the fitting go faster. I actually take and hollow the bottom of the foot just a little bit. And you don't have to do much, because you want to, the ideal is you put a little hollow on this, And then when you use the sandpaper, you're going to flatten it back off. So you just want a little bit, just a little shaving in there, and it just makes the fitting go faster because you're not fitting that whole foot right at first. And for me, I tend to get a squarer, truer foot out of it. And you'll see historically a lot of violin bridges, the under when you if you take the bridge off, the foot will be concave. It's not the ideal, but it is very, very common to see that historically on old bridges, and even most modern guys do the same thing. Because then you're just kind of fitting this little tiny outline, and you can make it look really good. So what I'll do is take a little strip of sandpaper, and not very. This is 1/4 inch wide, 5 mil, however you want to look at it, 5 to 6 millimeters wide. I will actually just kind of line it up with that deal. I'll hold it with one hand, stretch it across there, so we've got a nice, right across that arch. So I can come in just a little bit. And you'll see there are rigs that hold these, and they go vertical. They go up and down the top this direction. I actually just go side to side a little bit. See if I can do this where you can actually see it. Normally, I'm not worried about anybody trying to see what I'm doing. Let me see. Let me switch hands here just a little bit, and maybe I can get this where you can see it. There we go. And I'll just go side to side very slowly. I don't want to go very far side to side. Keep it pretty small. And the further you wander off to one side, you'll see that arch no longer fits. So the further you get out of the center, the worse it will fit when you're standing. So you want to keep it pretty close to center. You want to try to hold that, square to the top. And I just kind of look at the footprint on the sandpaper, and I can see, when I'm getting all the way across that foot. You can use pencil, mark the bottom of the foot, and have it so you can see exactly where that is fitting. Now you can see that is a pretty close fit. I have the back looks pretty solid. Oh, well, if I turned it the right direction, it would help too. And that's one thing sometimes, and I just did it, so you can see it's easy to do. I flipped the bridge when I was sanding it instead of holding it the same direction. I can see one of the marks on one of the feet. So let me sand that a little bit more, get it in the actual right direction. So if you have a bridge that has a marking on it, like a brand on it, then it's easier to tell which way is which, as far as you can pick a direction for it to sit. And it'll mark it. This one I should have put an X on it to make sure I stayed in the same direction. All right, that looks great. So that is pretty much fitting the feet. That is it. So now that bridge foot is fit to the top, and you can see it didn't take very long to do that particular part, and that's the kind of the hard one. So now I'm going to switch to a different violin here real quick, and just because this was, like I said, I wanted to show that because it was more exaggerated of a bridge. And I have, which one did I fit? I already took and fit. Oh, I fit the bridge yesterday, and this is one I just fit the feet on this one already, so we can just go with this one. And I did on this one, I did put an X on one side to make sure I was keeping it in the right direction as I was fitting it. So after you get the feet fit, now we're going to use the fingerboard to mark the extension of the fingerboard. And this is where the little 6-inch rule, it can be longer. You just need a good straight edge for this. And just hold the bridge into place on the notches, hold it centered, Now you're going to kind of go where the strings would be. So your high E here, sorry, trying to do this, see if I can do this and get my hand out of the way. Do your low here, focusing on my hand, not on the ruler. And now I will have, I don't know if it'll show up, I have two little notches. And the one thing I didn't grab was my pencil. I have a notch, and I got to move it so I can see it again. I have one there. I have one there. So those are my two extension marks off that fingerboard. Now you can see on this one, they're pretty exaggerated on one side to the other. And that is not uncommon. It's not ideal, but it's not uncommon to see that. And so it'll make the bridge pretty exaggerated on one side to the other. And now we're going to take the template here, and I just use, so you have two different measurements here. You have the 4 millimeter and the 5.5. You'll want to use the 5.5. The 4 is for measuring down about halfway through. Halfway, kind of like where we do like measure the 12th fret. It's for coming and measuring the string height up in here. And that's why they have the two different sizes. So I use, this is the low G side. So I actually just line that up with the notch, or with that little dot, make a mark. Same thing over here. Line it up with the little dot. I don't know if that's, sorry, let me mark it and then I'll show it. So I just took and lined that up with the bottom of the dot, made a little mark above that. That is that is now my lines for the height of my bridge. I can now take those two marks and I line up that template like so with those marks. And now I can scribe that top line and get that, and get the curvature of the plate. Or not, sorry, not the plate, the bridge.
Sorry, Luke, can you just do that from the dot? Show me that measurement again.
So from the dot, that's my fingerboard extension. And then I use, let me do this side. So I actually just use so on the high side, I use the 3.5 millimeter spacing. And you can just do it with a ruler too. I mean, you can just take a ruler and measure, from that dot, 3.5, from this dot, 5.5. This just already has that measurement here. Like that is that measurement right there. And so I just use this as a quick guide of, setting the dot on the bottom, marking the top. That's 5.5 millimeter. So it's just a quick reference.
And then that other step is for measuring the action around the middle of the scale. The other step, the 2.5 there?
0.5, yes. So the 2.5 is for measuring, like once it's strung up, you can measure the height here.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Yeah. So it just gives you kind of a line to, it gives you, so if you have a violin coming in and you go, oh, I want to see how the string height is, with the strings on, you can take this and go, oh, it's a little high, it's a little low. That's what those two notches are for. Just to measure your given height. So you should be, like when you're strung up, right here at the bottom of the board should be like the 3.5, 5.5. Like right at, right down here. That is the ideal. You'll actually be, the ideal technically is a little bit lower than that. Most players like more of like a 5 to 3 right here at the end of the board. So it is one of those, sometimes you'll fine tune them in. Now, one thing I will say, one thing I have to fight here that you guys may not have to, is I will actually have these bridges dry out because I'm in a humidified shop and I'm in the desert. So when they leave and it goes outside and it's 10% humidity or less, these bridges, because of the grain orientation, will physically shrink. And so I tend to leave these the full 3.5, 5.5, anticipating they're going to shrink down about a 0.5 millimeter and come right down to where they should be. Like I said, that's not something everybody has to worry about, but some people may have to. Another trick I have done with that is I actually have baked these bridges before I cut them. So I have a little toaster oven, that's bought it at the the thrift store. Set it at 350 for about 10 minutes. You just drop the bridges in once it's heated up and give it 10 minutes. It shrinks the blank. And so then when you cut it, it's not going to shrink as much. I didn't worry about that for this because this is probably not going to be this violin's final bridge anyway, once we finish doing the other work to it. So right now, this violin, the fingerboard is not actually attached. It's just taped in place. So that's why I didn't want to. This isn't going to be its permanent bridge anyway. And so from here, you'll actually just take and cut this off however you choose. In school, we learned how to do it with a knife and a file, which is fine. If you want to go that route, that's great. I use a sander because I don't want to spend that much time, sitting there and chipping away and filing this. I'll use my sander here in just a second and trim this all down. Now, the other measurements you need to know from here is the new top thickness. So once you get this trimmed down, your top thickness is I'm trying to remember, millimeter. So about 1.5 millimeters. This is one of those things I do by eyeball so much that I don't really measure much anymore in that term. So the very top, let me do this. I have a violin here with the cut bridge. So there we go. The very top surface of the bridge here, the actual thickness of that is about 1.5 millimeters once it's all cut into place. There we go. And your bridge thickness here in the middle should be about 4.5 to 5 millimeters. Now, the reason I give the range on that one is if you have a softer maple blank. So if the blank is softer, and you'll get a feel of this as you go through. I mean, we've all ran into different woods like that. If you have a little softer one, I would err on a little thicker because they can warp over time. So you'll actually have, with the string tension, you'll have this bridge start to curl with the bridge tension. So having a little thicker middle right here in this area, having this a little thicker right here, about 5 mil for a softer maple bridge, will make it substantially more resilient to that. Sorry, my dog just hit my one stand. I don't know if anybody's watching the other.
Did you say how long and how high you cook these for?
350 for about 10 minutes.
Okay. Wow.
And so it's kind of doing, it's not exactly doing the why can't I think of the word? Anyway,
Torrefaction, but it is drying them out.
It is drying them out. It's not a torrefaction because it's not under vacuum or anything like that. And we're not baking them for that long. But it will actually darken them. Some of them will get a more of a color closer to this. A darker, richer color. So it is a way to kind of make a less expensive blank look a little nicer. If you forget them, they will go crispy. They will burn eventually if you leave them in there too long. I found out the hard way. I put some in, and when the toaster oven was smoking, I realized what I had done. But anyway, so yeah, you want
Real
these
quick,
about.
is that before or after you shape them?
I do it before.
Okay.
Like before I fit the feet, before I do anything, I go ahead and toast them. And that way I know what it's going to be, because I have had, like, violin bridges don't shrink as dramatically as like a cello bridge. I bake every cello bridge. I have measured these before and after in the oven, and I have had these shrink by 4 millimeters. Some cello bridges, not all of them, but some of them. So for them, I definitely will bake them every single time. Because in the past, I have had the problem of cutting a cello bridge, sending it out, in about 2 weeks, it comes back, the strings are laying on the fretboard. And so obviously it's like, well, I can't, I'm now eating a bridge because it wasn't their fault. It wasn't my fault. Just it happened because we're in the desert. And so I very quickly started baking every cello bridge.
Do you bake
to
those
get
at the same time?
You
Or
can.
do you bake them a
Yeah.
little longer than the violin bridges, or?
Yeah, so I still do it for 350 and I do it for about 12 minutes, 12 to 15. I kind of when you start getting a color like this, I stop. So like I will set a timer for about, for a cello bridge, I'll set it for about 12 minutes. I'll check on it. If it's not quite kind of that goldeny brown yet, I will set another timer for 2 minutes, and just kind of work my way up to it. So much of that just depends on the water content of the bridge. Um, and that is, it's one of those where in most parts of the world, you wouldn't have to deal with that because you have enough ambient moisture. But it is one way to harden the maple a little bit as well. So if you do, like, if you start fitting the feet and you're like, man, this piece is quite soft maple, and you weren't initially going to bake it, then you could bake it at that point and, make it a little bit harder, a little more resilient. Now that is also, it makes them more brittle. So that is a consideration. So like I do it especially for students just because I don't want these shrinking and I don't want to have to cut another bridge. But if it is an instrument that's like going through a middle school and you don't have the shrinkage issue, it can make them more brittle. So if they take a hit, they can just break across, where we have so many lines, so many holes across this bridge, they will usually snap right along that line. So these center two right here will break right about here and here. And so if they are too brittle, that they will snap off if they get hit. So that is a consideration to take on that. And like I said, for most people, they don't have to worry about it. Most shops never have to deal with that, with the craziness and climate that I deal with here. All right. So I'm gonna use the sander here real quick, and I'm going to take now. Okay, so I'll take this down to the curve, and then I thin out the bridge. I'll bring this up to about 1.5 millimeters. I usually just take it off the front face, so the face as far as when I come down to the thickness here, when I take off this amount of material. Sorry, let me get in a little better spot. Here we go. So when I take off this material on the front to thin it down, I normally will just take it off the face that's going towards the fingerboard, and I will make it a slight curve. So as I shape it, I will curve it so that this has a very mild dome on this side. So right now it is perfectly flat. There is no curve on that front face, but it will be when I'm done. When I was in school, we actually thinned these out with the hand plane and files and knives. You can do it that way. It just takes a long time. I use a sander because it's much faster, but it is much more risky. There is a good chance of taking a fingertip while you're doing this. So definitely go into that if you're comfortable with your sander. And how we would shape these is we'd actually take a block. I threw mine away years ago because I never used it anymore. We just took a wooden block. This is a cork block, but it'll give you the idea. We would have a bridge on there. You scribe your lines on the side. You would cut a notch out of the top of this block so that you could set this bridge down in and wedge it into place. And then you would take and start filing and carving the front face with this thing wedged into a wooden block. And it's a great way to do it if you want to get fancy and if you want to learn to take and do that time. I suggest getting comfortable with your sander just because it's going to speed you up dramatically.
So real quick, are you about to thickness it before you cut the height?
No, height first, then thickness.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to get rid of this because since I'm working on this face, I'm going to take this off. The second I touch this face, all of this pencil line goes away.
Correct. Okay. And then
down.
You said it's
and then go
one
from there.
about 1 to 1.5 on the top and 4.5 to 4 to 5 on the bottom, depending on the.
So I do. So you'll want to do about 1.5 to 2 on the top.
Okay.
You can do 1 if you have a very hard maple.
Oh, okay.
Like if you've got like one of these luxes or the deluxes, you can get down into that 1 millimeter neighborhood. I don't honestly suggest it for the most part because where that edge is so thin, the strings will start to cut down in easier. So 1.5 to 2 is a better measurement.
And then oh shoot, 1.5, and then we're taking it off of the neck side where the markings are at is where we're taking them off. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Now that being said, you can take it from the back if, say, like you fit the feet. Let me rotate this just a little bit. Say, you got the feet fit really good, and this thing is leaning slightly to the back. Then you could take it off this back side.
Okay.
Cut the height down, take the back off, and then once you take that off, the bridge will look like it's been, it's vertical. So you can take it from either side. It doesn't really matter. I normally try to do it all from the front. So like right now, I don't know if I can get that to line up perfectly. You can see like this actually is fit just a little leaning forward, just a hair. Part of it is this top actually has the feet actually sit in 2 divots. So it's gonna that bridge is gonna want to tilt forward. So this is one definitely where I'll take everything off of this side. When I'm done, that bridge will actually look very, like a pyramid. Both sides will be angled in just a little, and it'll look really nice that way. But yeah, it is very common once you get fitting that you're going to have it leaning just slightly one side or the other, and you can kind of take the thickness off that side to make it look better.
So neither side ends up perpendicular to the top then?
Not really, and over time they tend not to be anyway.
Okay.
That's the ideal. Like that's the goal, but hardly anybody ever hits that goal. Especially over time, because once you put the string tension on there, and over time that bridge just starts to lean forward anyway. They rarely stay absolute vertical. The ideal, basically would be the center line of the bridge would be perpendicular to the top. But there is a argument for having both sides tapered that way, so that bridges that are flat on the back occasionally will actually warp backwards. It's uncommon, but I do see it occasionally. So instead of warping forward where 90% of them do, some of them will actually warp back because this side is so flat, and it's just the least resistance side. And then those are really hard to deal with. Like if it's leaning forward, you can usually straighten them back out. String tension will kind of help straighten them back out a little bit. But if they lean back, you try to straighten them and they just keep going. So those you do have to replace more frequently if they tilt back.
Do you level the back before you start on the front?
Not normally. I usually do it as I'm working both sides.
Cool.
I was gonna see here if I could move my. I think I can swing. 2 seconds. I'm gonna throw a phone stand up or a phone stand real quick right up here by my sander. That's one part I did not think about last night when I was setting up. And then you can actually see the sanding. There we go. Okay. So this will get loud for just a second. Be patient.
Once that's all in the same bath, one chicken contains harmful bacteria like salmonella that'll spread to the rest of them. Therefore, the USDA mandates another layer of sanitation.
Sorry, my dogs just saw another dog outside and it's going crazy. So anyway, there's the top. This is sitting at that's sitting right at 2 at the moment. And then I always measure kind of, this is the easiest place to measure. We're sitting just under 5 millimeter here. So that's the thickness there. Now, like I said, I just do that on the sander because that is just so much faster than going, trying to go through and finish that out with, with a block and a plane and files. And so at this point, you put your notches in. Let's see. So these have your string spacing on it. So you can take it, just set it right, center the bridge in the template. Let's see if I can this. I'm not used to doing it from the back side of this. So it has the notches are right on the front. And so you can actually just use that to mark the string spacing.
So you're not registering to the bottom of it, you're just lining up your profile with the top profile?
Just marking it, because this is just your spacing. So this doesn't tell you anything as far as like height on the bridge or anything like that. This is, that's what these little notches are for, but that's it. So this is purely just giving you your 4 marks to put your string notches in. And I just use the guitar nut files. They do sell dedicated, violin files for this. I don't use them anymore. I used to, and then once I got into guitar stuff and saw the gauge nut files, I was like, yeah, why would I use anything else? So I actually use a 46 for the G and the D, because those usually are your thicker, and depending on the brand of strings, lots of times those 2 strings will actually be the same gauge or close to. And you only want them to go in, you're just doing it just enough to let the string sit in that slot. I will use the 36 for the A. And then depending on the E, if you're not using the little string protector, some E strings will have a little plastic tube on them that sits in the notch here. If you're using that little sleeve, I will use like a 40, 24, 28, somewhere in that neighborhood. If you're not using it, I use the 16 or the 13, both of which will work just fine. You just need a real small notch like that. So there it is notched. And of course, from here, I will usually round the top edge of the blank just to get rid of that. So from now on, from this point on, the bridge is a usable bridge. Anything you do to it to this point is purely aesthetical. And you can judge how far you want to go from there. So just a little bit, just to round that top edge, it just kind of cleans it up a little bit. So functionality wise, that is a functioning bridge. Now, of course, you'll take and string this up, and you check your string heights. If you need to fine tune, you can go back and trim a little bit more off the top. But functionality wise, that's as far as you have to take it. From here, so the things that I would do from this point, one, I would thin the feet, mostly down here at the corners. And this is where I take my little tiny knife and just come in, do a little bit of shaping. I'll shape one foot and not the other so you can kind of see the difference of them. And at this point, like anything that you do to it, you're actually just shaving a little bit of weight off of the bridge. So, as that goes, it should be a little bit better sounding. So there's 1 foot, trimmed, the other one not. It's not much. It does look them, make them look a little nicer, but it is definitely something that is, you can do to your discretion. And that's why I like this little knife, because it gets in there. I can actually pull that little curve. And of course, I'm cutting end grain of maples, so it is tough and hard, and that's why I'm only doing little shavings at a time. You can take a round file, do the same operation. Just take a round file, go through this and notch that out. The inside one, you definitely is more of a knife move. Now this bridge, so let me show you one thing here. So if you look at the bottom profile of this bridge right here, sorry, good. Right here is flat, this area. This bridge is already curved. So most of the time you want this to be a slight curve. So a bridge blank like this, the curvature is already done. You really don't have to worry about it. Now, you can take and open up the kidneys. So if I show, these are the same, whoops, not those two. These are the same manufacturers. You can see how much larger the kidneys are on the one. Now this is a viola, so it's going to be a little bigger anyway, but you can take and open up these kidneys, carve these out to make basically shaving weight out. That's what you're doing. And, in the violin world, basically they say the lighter the bridge, the better the tone. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that's what they say. And so they will, if you get into the really high end bridges, they're going to sculpt out these. They're going to sculpt out these kidneys. You're going to open up this heart a little bit. Now, see, this one I actually made look like a heart. I actually brought this point down. That's not how this originally was. They're always curved like this. So that is something, like I said, you can definitely do if you want, but you don't have to. The other thing is there is a small bevel. They just do a chamfer right here on the edges of the bridge. I usually do this a lot because it's quick and it's easy, and it makes the side profile of the bridge look narrower. So it's not physically narrower, it just looks narrower. So kind of a trick of the light, if you will. And for that, I just use a knife. I just take a knife, come right up here, just do that little bevel. And you can judge how big you want it. If you have a thicker bridge blank, you can do a little bit more. And anyway, it just gives that edge. It makes it look like a thinner profile when it's really not. But that's that's kind of the main things that I normally do on like a student bridge. If you get into the real, if someone's paying you, $200 to fit that bridge, to sculpt out everything and really take the time to carve out the kidneys and stuff like that, that's great. Go for it. But the bulky repairs are just going to be something like this. I'd normally just say thin the feet a little bit, do the chamfers, and call it. You don't have to get crazy about it.
Luke, can I add that this is crucial to have a razor sharp blade, that the sharp edge is doing the work, because it's so easy to snap off a foot with a dull tool at this point, and then you're
definitely it's one of those deals like this little knife. That's all this little knife does. Like it doesn't do any other task but work on violin bridges. So it tends to stay pretty dang sharp. I usually strop it, every couple bridges, just to kind of keep that edge intact. But yeah, definitely, get your knife sharp.
This is so frustrating to break one at this point.
Yeah, and you're going to, like, that's one of those things, like, you're gonna pop a foot occasionally. That's just how this rolls, and you hurry and you cut another one and you move on. I can do this if I'm just setting up and do this. I can cut a bridge, to this point in roughly about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how the top fitting goes. So it can be really, really quick. I charge, which is not enough, but for this small town, I charge $65 for a bridge. And so you can make some, if I'm charging 65, I cut it in about 15. I've got, $5 into the blank and a little bit of sandpaper. I'm not out much, I'm making pretty good money on that.
And that's good enough for the orchestral and student.
Oh yeah, for all your student stuff, intermediate, if you got someone that's bringing in, the 20 grand violin, yeah, charge them for that one. Make some money. This for something where you're really taking your time. The average on like a professional bridge, the blank is going to cost you. The blank's going to be $80, so you're going to charge them, upwards of 125 to whatever, 150 for the blank, and then you're going to charge your hour rate, for so you'd be cutting a $275 bridge. So it can get expensive really, really quick when you start talking these deluxe and super luxe bridges, because the blank is so expensive right off the gate. These are French maple. A lot of your really nice bridge blanks come out of France. I don't know why their maple seems to be the best, but it really is good quality. You have the Albert Miracore, and then the Desparo bridges are probably my two favorites as far as nicer bridges. Like this bridge blank is just a Chinese. I ordered this literally off Amazon to try them out, and they're not bad. They're not great. When I bake them, they're definitely a lot better. So these I just do a batch bake. If I'm just cutting one, I'll bake just one. But if I bake them, they're a decent blank for a student. And these are only costing me. I mean, these are costing me like $5-10 or something like that. So it's not bad. Well, do anybody have any questions, or did anybody actually try it?
This is awesome. Look, I'm gonna.
Okay.
I was wondering how much do they because you said that like a cello bridge can shrink as much as 4 millimeters. What's the max that they're going to expand, or is it kind of they tend to only shrink?
Honest, I don't know, because I've never had that happen here. My humidity is like, I'm in the high desert, and I honestly, like, okay, from mid-May until end of August this year, we didn't get above 10% humidity in the outside. So like I don't have the problem of things expanding. Can they? Yes. I just don't. I've never seen it to tell you.
Right.
How's that? And normally, normally they're not going to gain a whole lot, but they can. Like, I have seen cellos, and normally it's the body's going to change as much as the plank, and if you're lucky, they change at about the same rate and they stay fairly close. Like stand-up basses, you can either they make wheel adjusters they're actually installed into the bridge, so that you can move the bridge up and down as seasonal changes happen. Or I have actually seen a few cello players that have a summer bridge and winter bridge, because their particular cello morphs enough in the geometry that they need it. So then the question is, what do you guys want to cover next month? We could either do sound posts, pegs, or the fingerboard. I think are the next ones we probably need to. Those are the other big ones that you're going to run into a lot.
Just to for the sake of like bringing an instrument in for just a regular setup, the next thing would be the pegs and potentially the nut, just to if that could be a quick check on the, because like
the nut I was going to throw in with the fingerboard.
Okay,
they're kind of attached.
Cool, because I was going to say, like, just that way, so when she's done, hopefully this will be playable after the next class.
Yeah, I would say, as far as the repairs I see come in, as far as order of me doing the most amount of work, is bridges, pegs, sound post, fingerboard, a nut. Like that kind of is the what I see the most of. Bridge is definitely the most, just because since these are so thin and they move around so much, they tend to get broke. And so that is probably the most common repair I do. And then gluing bouts and that type of stuff. But that's that's more of a regional problem than most people have to deal with.
Do you write anything? Do you put like your name and date on the bottom of them anywhere or something, so when they come back in, you know it was your bridge?
I used to. I haven't much lately, just because no one else cuts bridges here. and like I know my work enough that it's like when it walks in the door, I can be like, I cut that bridge, or that is definitely not my work, So I don't, if you're in a more populous area and you have more shops around you, I would. And more of like one of the other reasons I would do it is, and the reason I should get back to it is to have a date. I honestly think putting a date on it is more important than anything else. So you can see like, oh, that bridge only lasted 2 years, or whatever, or I cut this last week. This shouldn't have broke already. So, because it's a good standpoint also, because if someone comes in and be like, oh, I just had you cut this bridge, and you can go, well, no, I cut that 4 years ago. It wasn't yesterday, because I've had people do that move to me too, where they want me to claim it on warranty when it's a bridge I obviously cut years ago, and that's just wear and tear. So I guess so. For next time, if we go, do you want to do pegs then? Is that it's one of the more expensive ones to dive into? Or would you rather go into fingerboard next?
All the things you listed are going to need covering, aren't they? I think. Now for me, anyway.
Yeah, pegs, fingerboard, and sound post. All of those you kind of have to cover to get through a full setup. Fingerboard is the least of it, because normally, if it was built well enough, you don't have to fool with the fingerboard all that much. And we can glance over nut slots and stuff like that real quick next time. So I think we're over an hour at this point. So,
because the cool thing is, after these, how many are you planning to do? Ideally, everyone.
And tell people tell me to stop.
Okay.
So, I mean, eventually I would like to get into pulling it apart. So taking the top off, repairing cracks, bouts, doing edge grafts, actually get into more of the serious stuff. Because that's like edge grafting on violins isn't done very often because they're small enough they don't get that hammered. Cellos, on the other hand, and stand-up basses, you're always doing edge grafts because they get hammered. Putting them up and down. When you lay like a cello or a bass down on the ground, you lay on its side. If you're on carpet, it just chews that edge up, and pretty soon you just start peeling chunks off.
But I mean, after maybe 3 or 4 classes, everybody would be able to contact the local orchestras and the school programs and stuff to start doing setups and all that stuff, like confidently.
Yeah. Once you get past the 4, so the bridge, the pegs, the fingerboard, and the sound post. Once you have those, you can do setups. The bulk of your work is that's where your bread and your butter is going to be. Once you get into structural repair, and you'll find it's very much the same as the guitar repair, structurally wise. You just have to get more specialized tools. You have to start getting the cello, or like the clamps that can go over the arch of a violin. I don't plan on getting down deep like Jerry does I can't think of his last name, out there in Boston. Like I don't plan on going that deep in these classes because I don't go that deep. Like I've done button grafts, I've done neck grafts, like I've done them, but haven't done them enough that I would want to teach them. Let's put it that way.
How about bow rehairs?
We can cover bow rehair. When we get we'll work on the violin, and then if we want to do bow rehairs before we get into structural, we can do that. Vicky will actually be teaching it, and that's my mother. She'll be doing that class. So I'll have to get her to get here earlier in the day to do it.
What do we need to have for the next class?
Do you want to do pegs or fingerboard?
You tell us.
I don't really care. I've got stuff for both.
The
pegs are, like I said, the pegs are the more expensive one to get into because you'll want to get reamer and like a peg shaper or a reamer. So something, and you don't have to get the really expensive ones, but I don't know which one is pinned right now. So there's the peg shaper, at least that I have. Now you can get ones that are just a single, or a smaller set, but you want to get a peg shaper or something along those lines. And this is for fitting new pegs, also for doing some maintenance work. And then the reamer, you don't have to get the spiral reamer. These get expensive. You can get just the straight flute reamers. I just do this enough that I wanted the nicer tool, and they do work smoother as the spiral reamer. So
is the taper the same for all of the instruments?
yes. So this reamer will do viola to violin, down to about half size violin, and then they actually make another reamer. There it is. So then they actually make a smaller reamer and a smaller set of peg shapers for doing the small violins, half size to 8 size and 16th.
Yeah.
So they do make some different gauging. But for now, we would just need the standard, the full size shaper reamer. I like using peg dope for this, which is another thing you would want to get a hold of. Why can't I find my peg dope? Oh, here it is. I broke the outside case, but you'll look for the one that it actually looks like. I like the one that looks like a lipstick. So this is the Hill and Son peg dope, and I like it the better than like the drops or anything like that. So that would be the other thing you would want to get. You'll use this a lot if you're gonna fool with pegs, having some good peg dope, and then if you have them to get really sticky, which most people don't have that problem of, but I do. I actually use Ivory soap, and you can see this is a very old bar of Ivory soap. I've had it for probably a decade, so it tells you how little you actually use it. But you can use this to smooth out if a peg gets really sticky. You can put this a little bit on the peg, and it'll smooth it out.
Do you think that I could trouble you to make a list of links for stuff you think is appropriate, and then we can find what we need from our region?
Yep. Yeah, because you should be able to find like Ivory soap. I think it's just a pure soap. Like there's no.
That's easy.
Yeah, like this is. I think I bought this from the dollar store or something like that. Like I think it's kind of everywhere or something similar. Just a real basic, no perfumes, no additives, just a basic soap. And then the Hill and Son peg dope you can find online. But I'll find some links and get it sent to you.
Awesome. And then we can post that for everybody.
Okay.
The taper is on that reamer.
I don't, to be honest. It's violin taper. It's the modern taper, because you can get a modern and an antique taper, and you don't want the antique one. You just want to do the modern taper. I'll find a link and we'll get it posted, because I don't honestly. I probably knew at some point, but I bought these 25 years ago, and I have since proceeded to forget what they were.
Is it a different taper than a guitar peg?
Yes. Yeah, it's closer to the 3 degree, but it's not quite a 3. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. But yeah, the 5 degree taper is really close to the antique peg taper, and those are miserable to work on. I try to convince people to change those pegs out whenever I see them. So the historic, and we'll go over this next time, but historically the taper was was a much steeper angle, and they just, once they get to a certain point, you just can't use them anymore. Like they won't tighten anymore, so they don't function very well over time. They're great at first.
Will we need a new set of pegs for our subject violin?
Not necessarily. If you want, but we don't have. I'll cover it, but if you don't want to, if you don't want to buy the new set, you don't have to. You can work with the existing pegs, and that's what I'll go over both. We'll show just working like an old violin set of pegs to make them work better. And then we'll cover like actually just doing a fresh install.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Luke.
Yeah, no problem.